I'm going to start here, and that is with some fallout and some follow up to last night's Dynasty pay per view, in specific, the finish of the main event, which it's not going well for Tony Khan or AEW. The finish was not popular, and it's not just the typical anti AEW or WWE tribalist crowd that's piling on this time. This was not a popular finish to the Jon Moxley Swerve Strickland match, even among AEW fans and AEW hardcores and reviewers who are typically fair when they're breaking these things down. It's been near universal in its rejection / criticism of how that main event finish was all laid out and booked. And I think it's interesting because it's interesting in that there seems to be near universal rejection of the finish last night. And it's not just because Swerve lost, right? I talked for about 2 weeks in the lead up to the show, and we talked a lot last night on the Instant Reaction Live, how beating Swerve in that match was kind of playing with fire. You really ran the risk of getting the wrong kind of heat with the AEW fan base, in particular, the most devoted portion of the AEW fan base. So a lot of people had convinced themselves that Swerve was going to win the title. And it was really a dangerous play to book that match and then have Mox, an unpopular champion who heads up an unpopular stable, who've been involved in an unpopular storyline, defeating one of the most popular wrestlers in the company and someone who is seen as a homegrown star. It was going to be tricky. You were going to be tap dancing around landmines, so to speak, to find a way to book that result in a way that wasn't going to get the wrong kind of heat. And I spent a lot of time in the last week or so talking about how, just from, with my analyst hat on and with the job that I do, it was going to be more interesting for me if Mox did win, because I'm getting exactly what I thought we would get. Enormous fallout from that. And a topic that I can get a lot of mileage out of, because a lot of fans are annoyed. A lot of fans were very put off by the booking of that match. Whereas if Swerve won, what is there really to talk about? All right, we put the title back on Swerve, and our long national nightmare of the Death Rider storyline is, if not over, at minimum, the title is finally off of Mox, which is what a lot of people wanted. There's not a ton to talk about there. There's not a lot to break down when everybody's happy. Maybe just the direction of where you're going with All In, but with Mox winning, you still get to discuss and break down and speculate where we're going for Y'all In, or is it All In or All Out? Whatever. The show in Texas coming up. All In. So, but on top of that, there's going to be a lot of discussion, and someone like me can get a lot of mileage talking about not just, it's controversial on its own just to put Mox over in that match, but in the way that it happened. I think that it was a finish that would have gotten over with WWE fans. And we discussed this a bit last night on Instant Reaction Live, which the audio I'm doing right now that you're listening to is available on all subscription tiers. So if you want to hear the Instant Reaction Live, which I thought was a tremendous review, particularly not just this topic, but I thought we had a great discussion about Kyle Fletcher, and it's a really great review. You're going to have to go up to the $10 tier to hear that. But I really feel like the finish of the main event would have gotten over with WWF fans, specifically because they would have been really into the Hangman Swerve drama. Who's Hangman gonna clothesline? Conflicted Hangman. How does he feel about Swerve now? That's the kind of storytelling that WWE fans, modern WWE fans, eat up. And then the whole surprise and mystery of the Bucks return. And essentially costing Swerve the match. And all of the intrigue and mystery surrounding that. Again, right up WWE's alley in terms of how they tell their stories. And leaving that hanging and making us wonder what's going to happen on Dynamite. And what was the Bucks' motivation? Were they, did they think they were helping Hangman? Is Hangman going to be annoyed because he has these conflicted feelings towards Swerve now? Were they cozying up to Moxley since we saw they were terrified of the Death Riders the last time we saw the Bucks? Those are all unanswered questions. And really just the, for lack of a better term, all of the melodrama and quote-unquote storytelling surrounding the finish of that match. I called it a pile of overbooked chaos on the review last night, and that's really what it was. And honestly, that pile of overbooked chaos saved what otherwise was a very boring match. So at least we have something to sink our teeth into and discuss, if nothing else. But it was the kind of overbooked chaos and the type of storytelling that currently gets over with the modern WWE audience. But this was AEW. This wasn't WWE. And, Tony Khan has spent a lot of time this week talking about how he says he listens to fan feedback. He was asked in the media call before the pay-per-view, and then he was asked at the media scrum after the pay-per-view, whether, the question, he was asked whether he listens to fan feedback. And both times he says that he does, and he takes fan feedback seriously. And, to some degree, he has to say that. Tony Khan can't field that question and then say, no, I don't listen to fan feedback. What do they know? I know what's best for them. And I know what's best for my... He can't say that. He'll get raked over the coals, no matter how he really feels. To some degree, he has to say that, of course, oh yes, fan feedback's very important. Of course, I scan my Twitter feed daily and pay attention to what the fans have to say. And here's the thing, whether he really pays attention to fan feedback or not, and I think that he does, but to whatever degree Tony listens to and takes into consideration fan feedback, on this one, he really should take note that AEW fans, and this is very clear, AEW fans largely don't want the same things as WWE, as the modern WWE fan. They just don't. And this finish is proof. Because if we could snap our fingers or wave a magic wand and just transport this match and storyline into WWE in front of their modern fans, again, they would be eating up this Hangman Swerve drama. They'd be eating up this surprise return of the Bucks and wondering where they stand. Who did they do this on behalf of? Themselves? For Hangman? Did they do it for Mox? Like, what was their motive? They would eat this up. And all of the mystery and drama surrounding it. That's what the Bloodline has been for 3 years. Judgment Day, which was like, dollar store Bloodline. And this is the type of storytelling they're doing right now with Paul Heyman and the 3-way match at WrestleMania, with Punk cashing in the favor and asking Heyman to be in his corner, and Roman demanding that the wise man reject Punk, but Heyman unable to do it. So now what's the story going into that 3-way match with Punk, Roman, and Seth Rollins? It's not who's going to win the match. All of the drama, all of the story is keyed in on and focused on who Paul Heyman is going to side with. Because that's the type of storytelling that works and connects with modern WWE audiences. And everything that we saw last night at the end of that main event was in the same vein. I don't know who doesn't want to hear this, but there isn't a fundamental difference between Hangman conflicted on who he should give the flippy-do clothesline to at the end of that match, and Jimmy or Jey Uso conflicted on who they should super kick, with Roman standing in one corner and Sami Zayn standing in the other, or whatever the fuck. There's no fundamental difference between what we saw last night with Hangman and what we saw with Paul Heyman on SmackDown, where he was emotionally distraught to the point of tears over whose corner he was going to stand in at WrestleMania. Yeah, I thought the whole thing was corny and dopey and contrived and silly, and I'm just laughing at my TV like, who could possibly give a shit about any of it? But a lot of people do. The modern WWE fan base, that's what they're into. And I can guarantee you the vast majority of that audience is more into the idea of who Heyman will side with than who actually wins that match at WrestleMania. And I think last night's finish, whether it was by design to try to tap in sort of to that fan culture that we have today, or whether it was inadvertent, it all had sort of the same feel. And if you're a hardcore AEW fan, you might be screaming at your device right now, telling me how wrong I am and how dare I compare Hangman Page and Swerve to the Bloodline. It's not a one-to-one, apples to apples. I don't think it's nearly. Let me be clear here. I don't think it's nearly as corny and as over-the-top melodramatic. And I don't think, obviously you don't get the same level of awful community theater one-act plays every week on TV like we got on the Bloodline for years on end. I mean, that shit was terrible. I don't like that any more than you do. But it's in the same genre. There's no doubt about that. Hangman saying that Swerve deserved to have his house burned down while they're being pulled apart from ripping each other's faces off. And then Swerve dramatically saying, I know. And then everybody freezes and we have a moment. There's not much degree of separation between that and what, the way that they do things in WWE. Which again, let me be clear. Not nearly as silly and contrived, but a cousin in the same family. And it carried into the main event of the pay-per-view. And, I pitched Rich the idea last night on the review that, again, whether intentional or inadvertently, involving the Young Bucks in all of this, maybe that serves as a bit of a buffer to soften the rejection of Swerve losing last night. Because the Bucks are involved, and the Bucks, to the hardcore AEW fan, they are AEW, all elite wrestling. So it's there'd be far more criticism to last night's match if it was just the usual Death Riders finish, if it was just Wheeler Yuta and Marina Shafir that cost Swerve the match. I think it'd be a much angrier response today to Swerve losing. But with the Bucks, maybe that does provide a little buffer. And the hardcore AEW fan, although they may not be happy with the finish last night, they're willing to see where the story goes because, oh, wait, now the Bucks are going to be mixed up with Hangman again? Okay, we hate that finish. We thought it stunk. We're mad that Swerve lost. But we're not as mad as maybe we would have been because let's see where this goes. We're obviously getting more Hangman and Swerve. We love that. And all that entails. We might not be getting a title match between the two at Double or Nothing or All In or All Out or whatever the fuck. But they're programmed together again and now the Bucks are in the mix. Okay. We'll wait till Wednesday. We're mad. But we're not as mad as we would have been. Maybe that's the case because the Bucks were involved. But I think one thing Tony has to consider, and one thing that Tony hopefully has learned, is that the AEW fan base is still different enough from the WWE fan base that in some cases they'll reject things that WWE fans would not only accept but embrace. And hopefully that's one of the lessons Tony learned if he really is paying attention to fan feedback. Because the finish of this match, whether you agree with my analysis of it or not, what we can all agree on is it clearly did not get over. Seemingly everyone hates what they saw last night, for one reason or another. But as I correctly predicted before the pay-per-view, if nothing else, this is far more interesting than discuss had Swerve just won. There's really not much to discuss from that standpoint. So a finish like that is good for me. This is the second time I'm talking about it, and I'm sure we'll talk about it again on Wednesday, and we'll talk about it after Dynamite. I'll talk about it on the Thursday television review. We'll talk about it on the flagship. There's some mileage here for a guy like me. But the fan base is annoyed.